Bonjour tout le monde. J'ouvre maintenant la séance. Bienvenue à la réunion numéro.
I call the meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 87 of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. The committee is meeting today to discuss the work of the committee.
I'd just like to table my motion I'd put on notice last week. I understand, moving the motion. I understand the NDP has submitted already some lengthy amendments. I'm wondering if perhaps we can just distribute that to everyone rather than take time reading
but why don't you just take 30 seconds that you don't need to read your motion. Everyone has had it for a few days, but just to give the Canadians that are watching an awareness of what's happening, and I'll turn to Ms. Ashton right after.
Yeah. Both Canadians who are watching on CPAC right now, thanks for tuning in. So the motion is to have a study of GC Strategies, a value for money study on the $54 million spent on ArriveCan, mostly specifically around the contractors, GC Strategies, who received the bulk of the contracts, who then turned around without doing any work on the ArriveCan itself, merely turned around, added their 15 to 30%, which turned out to be about $11 million taxpayers' money, and then resubbed out the work to other companies, including very large companies like BDO, who then turn around and re-subbed contract the subcontracted contracts for the ArriveCan, further adding even more money for work not done. So it's just a simple study. I think we owe Canadians a value for money study on the ArriveCan and GC Strategies. Thanks very much.
I will note you seem to have, you're wishing to call the cast of Ben-Hur to committee, so we'll see what members think of that.
We asked for Ben-Hur, but apparently he's dead. So we've taken him off the list.
I will turn now to Ms. Ashton. Welcome for joining us today, and you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much. So I believe that the text is has been circulated or is being circulated, and I'll read out the full language of the text. That given the fact that GC Strategies, a two-person company that does not perform any actual work but exclusively subcontracts contracts they acquire, has received $59 million in taxpayer dollars from 2017 to present, and decades of unchecked spending on outsourcing, which accelerated in 2006, has cost Canadians tens of billions of dollars while creating a shadow public service that works alongside the real public service, but without the same hiring practices or transparency requirements. And despite government promises to reduce outside contract spending, the recently released supplementary estimates, parenthesis C, show an increase in contract and services spending of $1.2 billion. That the committee initiated a two-meeting investigation concerning the value for money the government has obtained through contracting GC Strategies, and through the practice of contracting and subcontracts since 2006, and that the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House. To facilitate its investigation pursuant to Standing Order 108.1, the committee ordered the production of all contracts with Government of Canada from 2006 to 2022 in an unredacted format. The witness list includes the following: 1, all GC Strategies employees, Christian Firth and Darren Anthony; 2, and any other witnesses that the committee deems fit to call. As many of you know, I am here to replace my colleague, MP Blake Desjardins, who is very keen to expand on this and further discuss it. Obviously, we share members' outrage that this kind of waste of Canadians' money is happening. This kind of disrespect of the public services is occurring, and I do, however, want to make sure that my colleague Blake Desjardins has the chance to speak to this more fully when he is back, and therefore I move to adjourn debate.
And just 1 second, please. Yes, and I'm going to call the question on that, please, Mr. Clerk, when you are ready.
Mr. McCauley.
No.
Mr. Nader.
No.
Mr. Stewart.
No.
Madame Vignola. Madame Ashton.
Yes.
Ms. Yip.
Yes.
Ms. Khalid.
Yes.
Ms. Shanahan.
Yes.
Ms. Bradford.
Yes.
Mr. Turnbull.
Yes.
Yeas pour 6, nays contre 4, 4.
So the decision to adjourn discussion on this motion and its amendment has been passed. You will note that the clerk has tabled 2 documents for you to consider when we next review this. The first is a clean copy of what Mr. McCauley's motion would look like if these amendments are accepted, and the second copy is a track change one, just for your ability to see very, very quickly what Ms. Ashton and Mr. Desjardins are proposing that we consider. So thank you very much, Ms. Ashton. Mr. McCauley, I've got a little list here. Mr. McCauley, you had asked to be recognized, but I suspect that has been dealt with now. And if it has, I'll turn to Mr. Stewart. But do you wish to take the floor, Mr. McCauley? The floor is yours.
Unfortunately, it has been dealt with. It's disappointed that we've adjourned debate, but that is life.
I guess that is democracy in action. I will now turn to Mr. Stewart. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move a motion that the committee call on the Auditor General of Canada to audit the National Capital Commission's $8 million barn project. After reading the motion, Mr. Chair, we have now heard from officials at Treasury Board and Public Works tell us that the National Capital Commission would answer all the questions from all members of the committee. We did learn from them that the National Capital Commission is a Crown corporation with a lot of flexibility on how they manage projects, and they do not have to follow the same procurement rules governing federal departments. We heard from Toby Nussbaum, the NCC CEO, who said that the Auditor General has not raised any concerns in audits over the past 5 years. We then heard from the Auditor General, who said that they did not audit this specific project. She said any financial transactions would have been checked to see if they were valid, but the auditor has not done a performance audit to see if the project delivered value for the $8 million of taxpayers' money. Also, the NCC has now come back to me asking which of the more than 30 questions to Treasury Board and Public Works and NCC we asked them, do we want them to answer? Which, of course, Mr. Chair, is all of them. At this point, Mr. Chair, we now have more questions, but no answers. Canadians need the expertise of the Office of the Auditor General to examine this $8 million expenditure. And as a note, the communications at the NCC is quite interesting, considering they have to hire additional comms persons to deal with a barn project. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Ms. Khalid, you have the floor, please.
Oh, no, sorry, I thought it was Ms. Shanahan first.
I did not see that, but I am more than happy to hear from Ms. Shanahan, then I'll turn to Ms. Khalid afterwards. Pardon me, Ms. Shanahan. The floor is yours.
Thank you very.
Okay. I'm sorry. I actually jumped, not one. I was so excited to see Ms. Khalid here today. Hold on. I actually did have Mr. McCauley first, then Ms. Shanahan, who I neglected, then Ms. Khalid, Piesa, Presa, Madame Bignol. Mr. McCauley, you have the floor, and I apologize. I will go have a cup of coffee now.
If I was you, I'd skip over me as well, Chair. Don't worry. Thanks, Chair, for that. I want to thank my colleague for bringing this forward. I think this is an important motion, important issue I think we should study. There are a couple of things I wanted to highlight that not included. In the annual corporate report from the NCC, it clearly states they're blaming Parliament for not appropriating enough money for the NCC to properly maintain the buildings. So at the same time, they're claiming Parliament is cutting their appropriations for maintenance. They're spending $8 million of taxpayers' dollars on a luxury barn on the Governor General's property. We saw in this meeting the NCC come and try to, I think, less than honestly try to deflect and claim coverage for their spending by using the Auditor General's audits. Now, it's very clear the Auditor General doesn't audit luxury barns. They audit the overall books, and I thought it was rather disingenuous for the NCC to 12 times, quote the Auditor General or bring her name in to deflect from their actions. And getting back to the barn, the luxury barn itself, we heard $8.1 million for a relatively small barn. I went looking on Realtor.com. In Edmonton's River Valley, we have a house about $5 million, so $3 million less than the barn, including buying the property on the River Valley near where Daryl Cates lives, who owns the Oilers. Has an 8-car underground garage, so the luxury barn has an underground, which costs a lot more to build down. Having built hotels, I know that, but it's an 8-car underground garage, has a 30-foot indoor waterfall, 6 bathrooms, and what looks to be about a half acre on the River Valley, the most expensive properties in Edmonton, and it's still $3 million less than building a barn, a luxury barn, that we didn't actually have to buy land for. We already own the land. So here we have a house with a massive garage, prime real estate, an indoor waterfall, 30-foot indoor waterfall. Yeah. And we could actually buy almost 2 of those for the price that the NCC paid to put up a luxury barn. So I think it's when we've got record numbers of Canadians accessing food banks, we've got people struggling with mortgage rates, to have $8.1 million on a luxury barn needs to be looked into so we can put a stop to this practice. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Shanahan, and apologies again, the floor is now yours.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you. And I recall the testimony that we heard and many of the questions that were asked at the time to both the Auditor General and to the officials from the NCC. And the thing that was most concerning to me, and I think to other members here on the committee, was the issue of deferred maintenance and how putting off work for years, even decades, actually adds to the cost of a project. And indeed, that at different times, with the objective of being, I would call it, penny wise, pound foolish, that projects were put off, and we all know what's happened to the costs of construction, costs during the pandemic, and so on, and that's where we find ourselves today. But not just with the storage facility that was discussed at Rideau Hall, which serves actually other buildings as well, other heritage properties, such as Stornoway, the official, the residence of the official opposition leader, and other heritage buildings. So I am here with proposing an amendment to this resolution, to this motion, and the amendment, once amended, it would read as follows: that the committee requests that the Auditor General of Canada investigate the long-term financial impact of deferring maintenance on federal heritage buildings, such as 24 Sussex Drive and Stornoway.
I'll come to that in 1 second, Mr. Nader. Thank you, Ms. Shannon. I just want to make sure the clerk or someone captured that amendment. So. Any chance you have something in writing or some email? Perfect, then. First, I'll hear the point of order on the amendment to the motion.
Thank you, Chair. And I would look to you for guidance, but I was wondering whether the amendment would be out of order because it's beyond the scope of the original motion, really changes the dynamic of the actual motion.
No, let me go look at it. Did you pass that out? Okay, 1 second. Ms. Shannon, do you have it in front of you again? Would you mind just reading it again?
Well, no, because I have notes on it.
Okay.
So, it's
No,
not
but could
really- it's
you
not a
read it
clean
again to the
copy.
record?
This is the copy.
This is,
Yeah.
okay, here.
I'm just going to suspend for 1 minute. We are back. So, Ms. Shanahan, I'm going to rule this beyond the scope of the motion. You are certainly welcome to come back with this motion. I have the clerk looking up for the rationale if you would like to hear that, or you could we could just proceed with the debate on the motion. But of course, you are welcome to bring this back at any time.
Can I hear the?
Yeah.
Can I hear the rationale? Yeah. No,
Yeah,
that
we'll
would
have
be
the
helpful. Yeah.
we'll have the clerk. I probably should have given the clerk another 30 seconds to flip through his well-used O'Brien and Bosk. No, I don't. This is not a challenge. This is a friendly inquiry. I'm sure we'll know when that happens. Should that happen ever? I'll just suspend for 1 minute again, then, please. We're just going to dust off our research books here. back into order. So this is probably a bit of overkill. I have ruled, but I will just to reinforce the decision that this it exceeds the scope of the motion before us. Mr. Clerk, if you could just highlight for folks the page and section you're referring to, please, in advising me. Thank you.
Yes, so House of Commons Procedure in Practice, 3rd edition, Chapter 12, page 541, 541, the process of debate. It states that an amendment is out of order procedurally if it is irrelevant to the main motion, meaning it deals with a matter foreign to the main motion, exceeds its scope, or introduces a new proposition which should properly be the subject of a separate substantive motion with notice. It raises a question substantially the same as one which the House or the committee has decided in the same session or conflicts with an amendment already agreed to. Or, finally, it is completely contrary to the main motion and would produce the same results as the defeat of the main motion.
So I think there's a few points there to hang the hat on. So that is my ruling. Mr. Shannon, you still have the yes, please. Over to you, please. Do you want the floor? If not, it's your
no.
call,
If you have something to say further on that,
no, I don't. No.
Okay, very good. As I say, Chair, a learning moment, and certainly my intention is to improve upon Mr. Stewart's motion because I think that we did learn quite a bit during that testimony, and there's more that we would like to learn. And so I would like to take this time to propose alternate wording. So the amendment that I am proposing would read as follows, the entire amended motion, that the committee call on the Auditor General of Canada to audit the National Capital Commission storage maintenance facility and the impact of deferred maintenance on federal heritage buildings in the National Capital Region.
Just 1 second, please.
Mm-hmm.
Could you either have a copy or could you read it again into the record, please?
Okay, very good. Slowly. That the committee call on the Auditor General of Canada to audit the National Capital Commission's storage maintenance facility and the impact of deferred maintenance on federal heritage buildings in the National Capital Region. And I think we can furnish some ad hoc French wording.
Oui.
Mais je ne compte pas là-dessus. Là.
OK, merci.
OK. Que le comité demande à la vérificatrice
That the committee ask the Auditor General of Canada to conduct an audit on the storage and maintenance facility of the National Capital Commission and the impact of deferred maintenance on federal heritage buildings in the National Capital Region.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Ms. Shanahan. Is this a speaking order, Mr. Nader? Is it
Order.
Point of order? I'll hear your point, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would just seek your guidance as well whether this amendment would be permissible for a similar reason as the clerk just ably read out.
So this one I will rule in order. It might need a little work, but I think broadly it is in order, so I will allow it. So it is a amendment to the motion. The clerk will type it up as quickly as he can and send it around. Do you just still like to speak to Ms. Shanahan, or should we let things rip?
Let the
and we can-
clerk do his work in fairness to everyone.
Okay, well, no, I'm going to let him do that, but do you still want to speak to it? Or if you do, the floor is yours. If you don't, I'm going to move on to another one. So.
Well, insofar as my intention here is to discuss the in broader terms, because I think that is very fitting with our role here in public accounts. We're always seeking to have better practices and to extend, both the recommendations that the Auditor General will make on any given towards any given agency or department that would better help the other departments in the public service, and that issue of deferred maintenance is a key one. I think it has plagued many different projects over the years, many different departments, and it is one that is irrespective of, I would think, the government in question. It goes toward, just our tendency of short-term thinking too often, which results in long-term potentially disasters where buildings are actually terms such as 24 Sussex that they're unsafe for human habitation. With that, I hope that the new wording captures that intention, that we're asking the Auditor General to look at this issue of deferred maintenance for all heritage buildings, including the storage facility that we studied more in depth. But I think that will be very helpful, and that will certainly advance the work here that we do as a committee and be of benefit to this and future administrations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I'll just hold. I will recognize Ms. Khalid next. I'm just going to check on the clerk. Ms. Stewart, is this a point of order or is this for speaking
I'm
order?
just going to speak to the.
Yeah, no, I've got you down, but there's
Yep, okay.
you are third after or second out. You're two after Ms. Khalid. Okay. So where the clerk is just working on the translation, and we'll send it out momentarily. In the meantime, Ms. Khalid, would you like to speak to the amendment to the motion, please?
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. Last week I wasn't here and I missed two very important meetings, I think, in this committee. I was in England as part of a Commonwealth delegation, and as I was, participating in the Westminster buildings in London, England, you really get to understand and appreciate the heritage sites and how well they're maintained. And then, you see the plaques of 1800s, you see the statues from the first time that that democracy was established and Westminster was established in London, England. And, I couldn't help but compare that to our heritage sites here in Canada. As part of the Commonwealth, earlier this year, I had also gone to the Ontario legislature to see how they're dealing with maintenance and upkeep of their legislative buildings, while also including in new traditions while preserving old traditions as part of the heritage and what represents our democracy in our country and our province. That delegation, looking at the Ontario legislature, also included members of provincial parliament from all across the country who shared their experiences with how they preserve their heritage sites, how they ensure that they're inclusive, that they are not only maintaining the culture and the heritage and the history of who they are and what they represent, but also how do they embrace new cultures and new traditions in accordance with how our democracies are evolving. So it was really interesting, Chair, that in Commonwealth in London, I did ask one of the staff there. I said, how much do you guys spend in in your regular upkeep of all of these heritage buildings. And obviously they're quite elaborate and quite beautiful and very, very well maintained. And the gentleman said to me, he said, MP Khalid, they are well worth the money that we spend. We maintain them very regularly, and that's for efficiency purposes. We don't let them crumble because they are part of our history. They are part of who we are as Londoners, as part of the UK and the Commonwealth. And it is well worth the money that we spend. And I asked him, I said, well, doesn't your citizenry have any objection to that? And he said, well, absolutely no, because, because people know and understand the value of maintaining that heritage and that history. And I think that when we had that meeting here, and we heard from the NCC about, how do we make sure that we not only endeavor into ensuring that we are preserving our history and our culture, and working with Canadians to ensure that we're being inclusive with all of that maintenance, but also to talk about how can we be more efficient. We've heard stories and reports on how 24 Sussex, for example, is completely uninhabitable. And I think that we as parliamentarians, as part of our job and our role, we have an obligation to ensure that our history and our heritage and our culture is maintained, and that we are spending money efficiently. $1 spent today saves us from spending $2 tomorrow on the exact same thing. And I think that this study, with these amendments that Ms. Shanahan has proposed, is actually a pretty decent one for us to endeavor into and see how can we make sure that we are being efficient? How can we make sure that that we are preserving our democracy? And these heritage sites are part of who we are as Canadians. And I really don't think, Chair, that anywhere in the world we would have any objection to spending that kind of money, but I do take the point that colleagues across this table have raised, that it needs to be efficient. So I, again, just want to support Ms. Shanahan's amendment to the main motion and say that yes, we need to preserve, but we also need to find efficiencies, and I'm looking forward to work with colleagues to find that synergy between the two.
Thank you very much, Ms. Khalid. Et Madame Vignola, vous avez la parole, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand both aspects of the motion, the original as well as the amendment. The original wants to concentrate on a garage on the site of a former barn, and it cost $8 million. Is this because of the time it took? Is it because of the contractor? There is no taking into account the heritage aspect of the project. So we see a building here that has conserved its heritage properties. They took the time to use artisans that would respect the heritage nature of this building. And in order to conserve, as Mrs. Khalid was saying, history, and I don't have any problem with that. $8 million for a garage with an elevator is quite surprising. It's surprising, so I do understand that my colleagues with the original motion want to specifically look at that in order to better understand what happened and to make sure that it won't happen again. And I also understand the need to include in a budget restoration and maintenance and daily maintenance of heritage properties. And also the need to calculate how much it would cost a year to act preventively rather than reactively. And honestly, I am very surprised to find out that that's not already the case, that heritage buildings are not better maintained, are not better protected, and are not better looked after. This has been ongoing for years. For years now, we've been talking about the Prime Minister's residence, and we let things go, regardless of who's in government and the who is the party in power. This has been ongoing for decades. So renovating a kitchen, if I remember correctly, I think it cost something like $180,000 under the Harper government for a functional kitchen. It wasn't even the main kitchen because everything had to be redone from scratch. Electricity, plumbing, cabinets, who knows what else. And so when you start opening up walls in a heritage building, you open up a wall and then a second one and then a third, and it never ends. And costs keep going up, and all of this because no preventative maintenance has been done. So I do understand the objective of my two colleagues. Now, should this be part of the same motion? This is my question, and because the objective is more or less the same. One is to understand how is it possible that expenditures have risen to the point where this type of project cost $8 million, and the second one is to see how prevention can save us money with regards to deferred maintenance. And so with the Prime Minister's residence, this is now a disaster management project, really. And so will we have to tear everything down and rebuild by respecting the original appearance, and it wasn't very functional? I've never set foot there, so I don't know. But what I do see is that it seems to me to be two distinct motions because the objectives are not the same. So I would suggest a friendly amendment, which would be to have two separate motions because the goals are similar, but not precisely the same. Thank you.
Et puis très bien, avant que je...
Very good. So before I go to Mr. Stewart, this is a question for the committee here. It's similar, but it's slightly different. And so it's not really a heritage building that we're speaking of here in the original motion. But it does touch on it. I'll stop there because I don't want to play politics here. Mr. Stewart, so this is a question for the committee to decide.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to the amendment, it does the language of the amendment, I think, although I don't think any of the members of our team are against studying a few more assets over there, that's for sure. We're probably far from finished. But the National Capital Commission, in their original communication and the original diagrams and ATIPs, they were the first to refer to it as a barn. So we will likely end up voting against the amendment just because of the language, though we don't necessarily disagree with including a few more assets. I just wanted to draw your attention to a couple of things. In my riding, just for an example, the community of Doketown built a brand new, modern, state-of-the-art hockey arena, and it was under $7 million. Now picture that. Neighboring communities of the rural community of Miramichi, Doketown, kids as far away as Blackville and Renews sometimes use the arena as well. The barn at the Rideau properties cost more than a brand new, modern hockey arena. Think about that. Think about it for a minute. Think of the two biggest projects for the city of Miramichi in the past 10 years. Dredging the river was going to be paid for by a private company. It was a $12 million cost. The river had been dredged probably since they were able to start dredging, maybe late 1800s, early 1900s. By 1994, it wasn't dredged anymore. So we were a port town originally, my community. And so the member from Beauséjour saw to it that a $1.5 million ask just to fix the navigational aids, which had deteriorated from the 90s, that was declined by this very government, as well as $5 million for the Northern Energy Solutions pellet mill, which was going to be situated in Newcastle on the former REPAP properties. That was going to be for tools, equipment, and jobs. It was a total project of, I think, around $80 million, if I remember. So if you look at, in rural Canada, some of the larger projects that actually ever get completed, I helped get a nursing home when I was a provincial MLA. It was a 30-bed nursing home, and I believe it cost $9 million or something. So if you look at the cost of an $8 million barn, nobody can understand the concept of that. We still don't know the square footage. We still don't know how many floors go underground. We still don't know what's down there. Most people have a barn. They just don't have it laced with fiber op and underground tunnels and elevators. Most people, where I live, could never understand it. And people, quite frankly, and properly so, are sick and tired when they look at an expenditure of this magnitude. This Rideau property, it's literally just one big racket. The Racket at Rideau. It should be a series of novels that we're probably going to write in due time. There's no value for money. And one other thing that I noticed, and I think it's really interesting, if you looked at the ATIP, it listed all of the companies and expenditures, but it listed Pomerleau as the main contractor. They were, say, the primary contractor. But when it was going to list what they were actually going to accomplish, that was the only thing on the document that was redacted. That was the only thing. I mean, it was very clear that they won the bid. It was very clear that they were the primary contractor and that they would handle some of the other contracting or maybe all of it. But it wasn't entirely clear what the purpose or scope of their employment would be. I thought that was interesting. That's the end of my comments. We'll be voting against the amendment.
Thank you. Ms. Kelly, you have the floor.
Thanks, Chair. I have 2 points to make. One, I just want to speak to Madame Vignola's comments. First off, I really appreciated them. I thought that they were very thoughtful and very engaging in adding to the conversation. The reason why I don't think that these should be two separate motions is because the majority of the witnesses that would be attending on both of these issues would be exactly the same. I think these issues are very intrinsically interlinked with each other, and so it just makes sense for us to be efficient and deal with this matter altogether in one motion. Secondly, Chair, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the game of cricket, but Rideau Hall, those grounds host the oldest cricket pitch in our country. And earlier this year, I was able to bring together parliamentarians and our diplomatic corps of the Commonwealth to come and play a friendly game of cricket. Canada won, in case anybody noticed or wanted to know.
Point of order, Chair, relevance.
I'm getting to my point, Chair. And so while I was there, we saw that the little clubhouse that they have for the grounds was in a significant state of disrepair. And talking to the Ottawa Cricket Club, who are volunteers that manage that clubhouse, they said, if the maintenance has been done a decade ago, we would not have had to spend so much money now. And now they're kind of stuck in this limbo where they don't have the funds, or that the funds that they would need to restore this beautiful property would be 3, 4, 5 times the cost as to when they would have been able to restore back when it was needed about a decade ago. So just adding that, Chair, and I would appreciate if we could call the question and see if we can get on to other business.
All right. Yeah, sure. I just want to make just one point of clarification, just to ensure This motion is not about a study before this committee or witnesses. This is to refer it to the Auditor General for review, and who that office. It's as I said. I don't think. I think Mrs. Khalid, you're aware of that, but I caught that. I just want to make sure no one else was deflected by that. This is for an Auditor General audit. Yes, Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One other point that I wanted to make. I was looking at the transcripts, and Public Services Lorenzo Tarachi said in 2021-2022, the National Capital Commission's budget was $239 million in total. At one point, I'd heard that 24 Sussex was going to be a $40 to $50 million upgrade. So like Ms. Khalid, I think that Canadians' heritage properties are important. As a baseball player, I secretly always wanted to play cricket. But I will tell you, Mr. Chair, something strikes me really interesting. When the National Capital Commission was here, I asked them who was in charge of making the decisions. What they told me was that an independent board makes all the decisions. But in another question, and I never got back on the floor to ask this part of it, but in another segment, somebody else asked about 24 Sussex. And the National Capital Commission said they're waiting on the government to approve that building. I've thought about it ever since, and here's why. And this is a point I want to make. I walked these grounds recently. It is a beautiful property, full stop, and Canadians should be proud of it. This is about value for money, clearly. So if the National Capital Commission is truly an independent board that is fully competent and independent to make their own decisions, why rely on the government on a $40 million expenditure that's now likely 70 because of the inflation that the government so aptly caused? My point is very simple. Why rely on the government for a decision you can make yourself? Why run the cost of 24 Sussex up through the roof in the 8 years that you neglected it? So if it cost $40 million to fix 10 years ago, let's just say that. Let's use that as an example. So 9 or 10 years ago, it cost $40 million to fix 24 Sussex. They have the $239 million budget to fix it. They can put it in their budget to do it. Yet they're secretly relying on the government to make the decision for them. Keep following. Why would the National Capital Commission spend $11 million that we know of at the Harrington Luxury Lake Cottage Chalet, or whatever we're going to call it over there? Why would they spend $11 million on that and $8 million on a barn that we know of, while all the while having a problem with assets and deferred maintenance, and yet leaving a $40 million, the biggest decision, the place where the Prime Minister normally resides, which apparently is rat-infested and has gone to the wayside? Why would they spend all this money on other random projects and not put the money on the residence of the Prime Minister, if in fact it is a heritage property included on the Rideau Lake properties? So you can see very clearly when the Treasury Board came here and Public Works, they said everybody else, the NCC can answer every question. They didn't. And when they left, they had contradicted themselves so many times before they left. I ultimately think we're going to have to bring them back in here for a week to sift through some of it. Now they don't want to answer the 30 questions I've submitted to them. I'm going to submit 30 more after today. Mr. Chair, I think there's something inherently wrong at the Rideau Estate properties. I know it, and we're going to continue to fight for it. We're against the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, we're going to call the question on the amendment, which I will read here. And it is to remove. I sent it to you. Yeah, no, I just want to say, yeah. It is to remove barn project and replace with storage maintenance facility in the impact of deferred maintenance on federal heritage buildings in the National Capital Region. Please call the vote, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. McCauley.
No.
Mr. Nader. No. Mr. Stewart.
No.
Madame Vignola,
No.
Miss Ashton,
Yes.
Miss Yip,
Yes.
Miss Khalid,
Yes.
Miss Shanahan,
Yes.
Miss Bradford,
Yes.
Mr. Turnbull.
Yes.
Yeas pour 6, nays contre 4.
Very good. So the amended motion now reads that the committee call on the Auditor General of Canada to audit the National Capital Commission's $8 million storage maintenance facility and the impact of deferred maintenance on the Federal Heritage Building in the National Capital Region. That is the... Yes.
No, I would like to refer you to the original amendment. I don't believe the $8 million was in there.
Well, so it wasn't, but I picked it up, as I said. The vote was to delete the barn project and replace with storage maintenance facility in the impact of deferred maintenance on the Federal Heritage Building in the National Capital Region. So all right. You are correct. I stand corrected. So the motion reads, I'll just read it again, or the amendment now stands that the committee call on the Auditor General of Canada to audit the National Capital Commission's storage maintenance facility and the impact of deferred maintenance on the Federal Heritage Building in the National Capital Region. Is there debate on this question? Let's call the vote on that.
Mr. McCauley,
No.
Mr. Nader,
This is the final motion. Do you want to read the full motion back
Sure.
again?
Here is, I will tee this up again and we will restart the vote. That the committee call on the Auditor General of Canada to audit the National Capital Commission storage maintenance facility and the impact of deferred maintenance on Federal Heritage Buildings in the National Capital Region.
So to confirm, we did take out the $8 million?
Yes.
And this is the final.
Correct.
Okay.
And if I could say, this, look, you're all welcome to use any language you like to describe this building. You will note that when I posted the notice for this original meeting with both the NCC and officials, I used language that was more parliamentarian. So this, like I said, you're welcome to refer to it however you like. This is how it has been referred to. Mr. Stewart, hold on, it's all point of order only, so it's not a comment because the vote's been called. Yeah. In fact, the vote has been called, so let's hear the vote, please.
Mr. McCauley,
Yes.
Mr. Nader,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Madame Vignola.
No.
Miss Ashton. Miss Ashton.
Yes.
Miss Yip.
Yes.
Miss Khalid.
Yes.
Miss Shanahan.
Yes.
Miss Bradford.
Yes.
Mr. Turnbull.
Yes.
Yeas pour 9, nays contre 1.
Very good. This will now be referred to the Auditor General Office for consideration. Mr. Stewart, do you have the floor? It is my intention to turn to line by line as soon as we can, but of course we're in committee business, so go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to say for the record that it was the communications brilliance at the National Capital Commission that determined to originally refer to it as a barn, and it was themselves who disclosed the egregious $8 million figure. So it's difficult for us because we want the audit to get done. So we had to support it in the end. But why the government officials and the NDP would band together and be hiding the very words that the National Capital Commission used themselves, I find that very interesting and suspect. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on this?
Yes, Chair. I just wonder who Mr. Stewart is referring to as government officials. I don't see any here at this committee.
Why don't we all just say, hooray, we passed a motion for the auditor. The auditor will consider it, given that it was nearly unanimous. With your permission, I will move to adjourn this part of the meeting so we can come back, suspend this part of the meeting and to come back in camera. Meeting is suspended for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.